I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. Standing by the side of a busy street in the heart of Lagos, my heart pounding in my chest, struggling to breathe. The air felt thick, heavy, as if even the city itself could sense what had just happened. It was a hot Saturday afternoon. The sun hung high in the sky, beating down on everything. I was in the car with him, my husband, Tunde, as we made our way to the market. The car was parked along the road, near a popular local food joint where we sometimes grabbed lunch. The engine was off, but the tension inside was suffocating. I could feel it in my bones, the shift in the air, the way he was looking at me, cold, distant, like I was nothing more than a stranger. I had no idea what was coming. "You need to get out." Tunde's voice came out low but sharp, like a knife being drawn from its sheath. I blinked, staring at him in disbelief. "What do you mean, get out?" "Tunde, we're not even home yet. Get out of the car now," he shouted, slamming his hand on the steering wheel. His eyes were wide, wild with anger. I said, "Get out." I froze, the words barely making sense. This wasn't like him, or at least it didn't seem like him. But lately things had been off. The past few weeks, even months, had been rough. He'd been distant, acting like someone I didn't even recognize. It started with the late nights at work, then the phone calls that were always just out of earshot, the secretive behavior. I'd brushed it off, assuming he was stressed. But that assumption was about to come crashing down around me. "Why? What's going on, Tunde?" I asked, my voice trembling now. "Why are you treating me like this? We've been together for 8 years. Enough!" he yelled, his voice cutting through my thoughts like a thunderclap. "I can't do this anymore. You're not the woman I thought you were. I don't want you in my life anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What was he talking about? I had no idea what I had done to deserve this. We had our problems, sure, but I never expected it to end like this. The car was still, the world around us moving on as if nothing was wrong, but everything inside of me shattered in that moment. I wanted to scream, to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I grabbed my purse, pushed open the car door, and stepped out. I stood there, in the middle of the bustling street, feeling the weight of his words crash down on me. Tunde didn't even look back. The car door slammed shut, and he drove away without a second glance. There I was, alone, confused, humiliated, with nothing but the pounding heat of the Lagos sun on my skin. What was I supposed to do now? How could he do this to me? After everything we had been through? He knew the sacrifices I'd made, how I had always put him and our family first. And this was how he repaid me? By kicking me out of the car like I was some stranger, some burden he couldn't bear? But the shock was just the beginning. Little did Tunde know, his betrayal wasn't the biggest shock I had for him. No, not by a long shot. And that's when it hit me, the truth would come out. I wasn't just some helpless wife anymore. I had something up my sleeve that would turn everything around. I wasn't just a woman scorned. I was the woman who owned the very company Tunde had been working for, the company he'd been sneaking around for weeks, lying about. And now it was time for him to face the consequences. Welcome to Stories by Anif. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family. It wasn't just a company, no. It was his company. The one he had spent years pouring his soul into. The one he had climbed the corporate ladder in, working late hours, staying away from home, all to make a name for himself. And his wife, was just a bystander, the one at home, raising our children and managing the household. I'd never once thought to dig into his work life. Why would I? We were partners in this life, or so I thought. But everything changed the moment he kicked me out of that car. I stood there on the street, watching the car disappear into the distance, and a wave of humiliation washed over me. But then, in the quiet of that moment, I had an epiphany. This wasn't just about the betrayal or the fact that he had disrespected me publicly. This was about control. For years, I had supported him, kept the home running, and made sacrifices so that he could focus on his career. I had never questioned his loyalty, his late nights, his sudden business trips. And yet, here I was, being thrown away like I was nothing. But what if I wasn't as powerless as he thought? I pulled out my phone, trying to gather my thoughts. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed the number to my lawyer. Her name was Ngozi, a fierce woman who had helped me with a few business-related matters in the past. She always had a no-nonsense approach to things. "Hello, Ngozi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to talk to you about something important." "Of course, Ada," she replied, her voice warm but professional. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath before diving into the conversation, recounting everything. From the constant late nights and suspicious phone calls to the argument in the car, and finally, the moment he kicked me out. Ngozi listened carefully, asking questions along the way to clarify details. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before she spoke. "Ada, there's something you might not know," she said, her voice low. "You know Tun's been at that company for years, right?" "Of course," I replied, still in disbelief. "He talks about it all the time. His dream job." "Well," Ngozi continued, "that company has been going through some major changes. The board has been under pressure for months. And guess who's been quietly buying up shares in that company?" My heart skipped a beat. "You mean?" "Yes, you. You've been buying up stock in the company without even realizing it. And now you're in a position to make some major decisions." I was silent for a moment, trying to process her words. It didn't make sense. I wasn't into stocks. I wasn't even sure how I had accumulated so much in the first place. But then I remembered those long nights when I'd sat up late after the kids went to bed, researching business moves. Those times when I quietly watched the numbers in the background, never sharing my plans with Tunde. The investments I had made through the years, not for any particular reason other than to secure a future for our children. It all started to make sense now. "What are you saying, Ngozi?" I whispered, suddenly feeling the weight of what this could mean. "I'm saying you've been buying up shares in your husband's company. Not intentionally, but enough to have a controlling stake. You're in charge now, Ada. That's why he's been acting so strange lately." I let out a breath, my mind reeling. All this time, I had been building a quiet empire without even knowing it. I had never cared about the company he worked for, but now, it seemed like fate had put me in the driver's seat. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was his boss. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "You do what you need to do, Ada," Ngozi said, a note of confidence in her voice. "It's time to take control. And when the time is right, make sure he knows who's really in charge." The line went silent for a moment, and I stared at the phone, my thoughts swirling. How had I let everything get to this point? How had I been so blind to the things happening around me? But there was no turning back now. I had a choice to make. Either walk away from everything I had worked so hard for, or use the power I held to shape my future. And I wasn't about to let Tunde's betrayal define me. I tucked the phone into my purse, my heart beating faster now with a mix of fear and excitement. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my life. The next few days felt like an eternity. I couldn't stop replaying the events of that day in my head, over and over again. The sting of Tunde's words, the public humiliation, had me in a whirlwind of emotions. I felt confused, angry, and betrayed, but I also felt something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Empowered. It wasn't just about what he did to me. It was about everything I had been blind to for years. I had supported him, trusted him, and given him my all, while behind the scenes he had been hiding things from me. But now the tables had turned. I had discovered that I wasn't the weak, helpless woman I had once thought myself to be. I had a secret weapon: the shares. It was time to put my plan into motion. I spent the next several days figuring out exactly how much control I had over the company. Ngozi had given me the starting point, but I needed to know more about the board, the decision-makers, and, most importantly, what Tunde's role really was in all of this. So I made some discreet calls. I reached out to a few old colleagues, some business contacts, even a former client who worked as an analyst for the company. Slowly but surely, I pieced together the puzzle. By the end of the week, I knew everything. Tunde's position in the company had been a stepping stone. His dreams were being crushed under the weight of corporate politics. He thought he had it all figured out. He had played his part in the corporate world, but now I was the one who held the power. Tunde had always bragged about his role at the company, how he was the one who made the important decisions. But as it turned out, he was just a pawn in a much bigger game, one where the board of directors had the real power. And now I was in a position to challenge that power. I spent the weekend strategizing. I knew I couldn't just march into the boardroom and announce that I was his wife. That would look suspicious, even dangerous. I needed to be smart about this. I would have to play the long game. But when the time came, when I had everything in place, I would make sure that Tunde would regret the day he kicked me out of the car. The plan started taking shape in my mind. First, I needed to establish myself as a serious player in the company, someone who couldn't be ignored. I needed to get on the board, gain influence, and find out exactly what Tunde was involved in. I could already imagine the look on his face when he realized his wife, the woman he had discarded, was the one calling the shots. But then came the hardest part: the emotional manipulation. I had to make sure I didn't fall for the same tricks Tunde had used on me. I couldn't let my anger cloud my judgment. I had to stay calm, collected, and focused on the bigger picture. This wasn't just about getting back at him. It was about taking control of my own life, my future. One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table, the phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Tunde. He hadn't called in days, and honestly, I had expected him to reach out sooner. He was a prideful man, but this was different. He had been quiet, almost too quiet. Was he trying to get to me? Was he hoping I would come crawling back? Or was he just too busy with whatever was happening at the company? I hesitated for a moment, letting the phone buzz in my hand. I knew I should ignore it, but something inside me urged me to pick it up. And so I did. "Ada." Tunde's voice came through the phone, sounding tired and defeated. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I didn't mean to push you away like that." I took a deep breath, holding back the rush of emotions that threatened to spill out. I hadn't expected him to apologize. And in that moment, I didn't know how to respond. He sounded genuine, but that didn't change what had happened. "You kicked me out of the car, Tunde. In front of everyone," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You humiliated me. And for what? Because I questioned you? Because I loved you." There was silence on the other end for a moment, then a sigh. "I didn't mean for it to get to this point," he said. I felt trapped. I don't know how to explain it. I could hear the regret in his voice, but it didn't matter. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, about my own strength, my own journey. I wasn't going to let his words change my course. "I don't need your apology, Tunde," I said quietly. "I've already moved on. I'm focused on myself now. And I'll be fine without you." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought he might hang up. But then he spoke again, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't want to lose you, Ada. Please, just give me a chance to make things right. I'll do anything." But it was too late. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to allow his guilt or his promises to sway me. My plan was in motion, and nothing could stop it now. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was time to show him who was really in control. The days following my conversation with Tunde felt surreal. It was as though everything had shifted, and I was no longer the woman who had stood by his side all these years. No longer the supportive wife, the one who made excuses for his late nights, his sudden trips, the distant way he had been acting. I had shed that old skin. Now I was a woman with a plan, one that I wasn't about to let anyone get in the way of. But as the days went on, something unexpected happened. I had been preparing for the board meeting, gathering all the necessary documents, getting advice from Gozi, and researching everything I could about the company's current standing. Yet, life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon, and I was at home, sitting in the living room, reviewing the latest board meeting minutes. My mind was buzzing with strategies when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. My first thought was that it might be one of the kids' schoolmates, or maybe the delivery guy with a package. But then I noticed the urgency in the ring. It wasn't the usual, slow press of someone casually waiting to be let in. It was fast, frantic. I walked to the door and peeked through the peephole. I froze. It was Tunde. I almost didn't want to open it. Not after everything he had done. But something inside me shifted, and before I could talk myself out of it, I unlocked the door and swung it open. "Tunde?" I said, the name feeling foreign on my lips. "What are you doing here?" He stood there, drenched from the rain, his eyes wide, filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine fear. I need to talk to you, Ada," he said, stepping into the doorway without waiting for an invitation. "Please, just give me a moment." I didn't want to let him in, but I also didn't want to stand out in the rain. So, reluctantly, I stepped aside and allowed him in. He removed his wet shoes by the door and wiped his face with a handkerchief. "What's going on, Tunde?" I asked, crossing my arms. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I kept it in check. My emotions were no longer his to manipulate. He glanced at me, his face contorting with an unreadable expression. "I need to tell you something," he began, voice barely above a whisper. "Something you don't know." I raised an eyebrow, the cynicism creeping in. "What could you possibly say that I don't already know? You've already humiliated me, Tunde. You kicked me out of that car like I was nothing." "This is different, Ada," he interrupted, his voice cracking. "You have to understand, I never meant for it to go this far. But I think you need to know the truth, everything. About what's been happening at the company. About you." His words made my heart race. "What about me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, lowered his gaze, and took a deep breath. "Ada, do you know who the real owner of the company is?" I blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about? I've known about the company for years. You work there. I thought you were climbing the ranks." Tunde shook his head, looking more desperate by the second. "No, you own it, Ada. You're the one who owns the majority of the shares. I didn't know it at first, but I found out when I was trying to secure my position. That's why I've been so distant. That's why I've been acting strange." He paused, his eyes pleading. "I thought if I could just keep you out of it, keep you from knowing, I could hold on to my job, my career. But now I see that I was wrong. I should have told you from the beginning." I stood there, completely stunned. I had been too angry to piece everything together before, but now the pieces fell into place. "You're telling me that all this time, I've been silently controlling the company?" I asked, disbelief coloring my tone. "Yes," he said, nodding slowly. "You've been buying shares for years, without even realizing it. And now you're in charge, Ada. The power is in your hands. And I've been trying to protect my own position, hiding the truth from you. I thought I could handle it myself, but I was wrong. It's all falling apart." I could hardly process what he was saying. Felt like the floor had dropped from beneath me. All these years I had thought I was supporting him, but in reality, I had been setting myself up for this moment. I had never known how much power I truly had, how much leverage I could use to change the entire course of our lives. But why didn't you just tell me? I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of frustration and hurt. Why keep this from me? Why lie? I was scared, Ada. Scared that you would take everything from me, that you'd use it against me. He admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to see me as weak. I didn't want you to realize how much I needed you, how much I depended on you. I stared at him for a moment, trying to process his words. I had spent so many years thinking I was the one who had been left behind, the one who had been kept in the dark. But the truth was much more complicated than I could have imagined. Do you really think I would take everything from you, Tunde? I asked, my voice steady now. I don't need your job. I don't need anything from you. But I will make sure you never forget how you treated me. And just like that, the reality of what I could do, the power I had, became clear. Tunde had played me for years, but now the tables had turned, and I wasn't about to let him off easy. Tunde's confession left me rattled, but not in the way he might have expected. There was no immediate sense of triumph, no overwhelming relief. Instead, all I could feel was the weight of everything. The betrayal, the manipulation, the years of secrecy, crashing down on me. I stood there in silence, my mind racing as I tried to understand the true depth of what he had just revealed. You've been holding out on me for years, Tunde, I said quietly, my voice barely a whisper. And now you want to act like it was all just a mistake? Like you didn't plan it all? He ran a hand through his wet hair, looking more disheveled than I had ever seen him. I never meant for it to go this far, Ada. I swear I didn't. But it's too late now and I've messed up. I'm begging you, please, don't let this destroy us. Destroy us? He thought I still cared about us, after everything that had happened? I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising anger inside me. It took everything I had not to lash out, not to let him see how deeply he had hurt me. But I had to stay calm. I had a plan, and that plan didn't involve letting him get away with this. You've hurt me, Tunde, I said, forcing myself to speak without bitterness. You've humiliated me in front of everyone, made me feel like I didn't matter, all for your career, for your ambition. But I'm done playing your game. I could see the regret in his eyes, but it didn't matter. There was no going back now. I had waited years for the right moment to take control of my own life. And now, with everything I had learned, the time had come. I'm not here to save your career, Tunde, I continued, my voice growing firmer with each word. You've already done enough to ruin it. But what I can do is show you how it feels to be on the receiving end of a betrayal like this. Tunde's face paled as he took a step back. What do you mean? What are you going to do? I met his gaze unflinching. I'm going to take control of the company. I'm going to take everything from you that you thought you could keep. And when you realize what it feels like to lose everything, I hope you remember the woman you kicked out of that car. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking at me like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Maybe he thought I would cave, that I would fall for his apologies and regret. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again. You think you can just take everything from me and walk away? He asked, his voice a little more defensive now. You're my wife, Ada. You're supposed to stand by me, not destroy everything we've built. I let out a sharp laugh, the sound bitter and full of disbelief. Build? You built this on lies, Tunde. On secrets. I don't owe you anything. The silence between us grew thick with tension. I could feel the storm brewing, the storm I had been waiting for. But I knew better than to let him see how badly I wanted to let loose. No, this wasn't about anger, it was about power. And I had all the power now. I took a step closer to him, my heart pounding in my chest. You've had your time, Tunde. But now it's my turn. He shook his head, his eyes pleading. Ada, please, please don't do this. I've made mistakes, but I can change. I'll make it right. Just give me a chance. But I wasn't listening anymore. His words were nothing but empty promises, attempts to get me to soften. But I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let him off easy. He wasn't going to get away with the way he had treated me, not after everything. You had your chance, I said, voice cold and final. And now it's over. I walked past him, heading to the living room where I had left the stack of papers on the coffee table. The board meeting minutes, the financial reports, everything I needed to take control of the company. Everything I needed to make sure Tunde understood the gravity of what he had done. As I sat down, sorting through the documents, I could feel Tunde's eyes on me. He didn't speak, but I could hear his shallow breaths, the weight of the moment settling in. He had no idea what I was about to do. I picked up my phone, dialing Ngozi's number. She picked up on the first ring. "Ada," she said, sounding alert. "What's going on? How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said, the words feeling like a shield, a wall I had built to keep my emotions under control. "It's time. I'm ready to take the next step." Ngozi paused, sensing the gravity in my voice. "Are you sure about this? Once you do this, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I replied, my voice steady now. Tunde had his chance. Now it's time for me to take control. I could almost hear her smile through the phone. "Good. You're doing the right thing, Ada. I'll make the calls, get everything in motion. You've got this." I ended the call and sat back, feeling a strange mix of relief and anticipation. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. The storm was coming, and Tunde had no idea how badly it was going to hit. The days that followed were nothing like I had ever imagined. I had taken my first step toward the kind of power I never thought I would hold. The power to take control of a company, to flip the script on Tunde and make him understand the weight of his betrayal. But even as I started to make moves, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that things were only going to get more complicated from here. I spent the next few days focused on setting my plan into motion. With Ngozi's help, I made discreet calls to some key players in the company, people who could help me secure my position. Tunde was still reeling from the confrontation, and I knew it wouldn't be long before he tried to reach out again, trying to fix everything. But this time, I wouldn't let him manipulate me. The board meeting was fast approaching, and I had to be prepared. The meeting would be my first chance to step into the company and make my presence known. I had to make sure I wasn't just another face in the crowd. I had to show them I was in charge. But then, just when I thought I could finally breathe, something unexpected happened. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Tunde, and it wasn't Ngozi. It was a call I had been dreading. "Hello, Ada?" The voice on the other end was deep, authoritative. I recognized it immediately. "Mr. Olamide," I said, my heart skipping a beat. He was the head of the board of directors, the man who controlled the company's decisions. "What can I do for you?" "I need to see you," he said, his tone serious. "There's something we need to discuss. It's about the upcoming board meeting. I'm aware of your situation with Tunde." I froze, my hand gripping the phone tightly. "What about it?" "You've been buying shares in the company, Ada. The board is aware of that," he said, his voice unwavering. "And we need to talk about what happens next. This could change everything." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This was it, the moment where everything would either fall into place or spiral out of control. If they knew about my shares, then Tunde wasn't the only one who had been hiding things. The board, the company, everyone was in on it. They knew who I was now, and they were watching me. "When and where?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. We'll discuss everything then. Don't bring Tunde." The line went dead, leaving me in stunned silence. I sat there for a few moments, trying to absorb what had just happened. This wasn't just about Tunde anymore. This was about the company, about the people who had been pulling the strings all along. The next morning, I dressed carefully. I knew this meeting could make or break everything. I chose a simple black dress, one that exuded professionalism without looking too harsh. I tied my hair back in a neat bun, a look of calm confidence on my face. I needed to be sharp, focused, ready for whatever was coming. When I arrived at the office, I was greeted by one of the company's assistants, who led me straight to Mr. Olamide's office. I could feel the tension in the air as I walked down the hall, past the polished marble floors, the framed awards hanging on the walls. This was the world Tunde had been so absorbed in, the world I had always kept a distance from. And now I was stepping right into it. Mr. Olamide was waiting for me when I entered his office. He was seated at his desk, a man in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and a sharp suit. His expression was unreadable, but there was an air of authority about him that made my heart race. "Please, Ada, take a seat," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We have a lot to discuss." I sat down, folding my hands in my lap. "I'm listening." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "I know you're upset with Tunde," he said, his voice measured. "But you need to understand, the situation is more complicated than you think. Your ownership of the company is not as straightforward as you might believe." I felt my pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" He sighed, as if bracing himself for what was to come. "You've accumulated shares in the company, yes. But there's something else you need to know. Tunde has been using the company's resources for personal gain. There are things going on behind the scenes that you're not aware of." I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of things?" "Illegal things," he said, his voice low. "Things that could bring the company down if they were ever made public. Tunde has been involved in a lot of shady deals, things that we've tried to cover up for him. But now that you're involved, it's a different story." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tunde had been hiding even more from me than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about his infidelity. This was about his corruption, his greed. He had been using the company for his own benefit, and now that I was a part of it, I had become entangled in the mess he had created. Mr. Olamide's gaze sharpened. "You have a choice, Ada. You can either expose Tunde and take control of the company, or you can walk away from it all. But know this. Once you make your decision, there's no turning back." I felt the weight of his words settle over me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about saving the company, and maybe even saving myself. I took a deep breath, my mind racing with the possibilities. I had the power now. I had a choice, and I wasn't about to back down. "I'll make my decision," I said, standing up. "But know this, Tunde doesn't control me anymore." Mr. Olamide nodded, his expression unreadable. "We'll see about that." As I walked out of his office, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. This was the moment everything would change, and I wasn't about to let Tunde, or anyone else, stop me now. The days following my meeting with Mr. Olamide felt like a blur. On the one hand, I was filled with a new sense of purpose. This was my moment to take control of everything I had worked so hard for, everything I had unknowingly built. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. The stakes were higher now, and the weight of what I had to do pressed on me every single day. I had made my decision. I was going to take control of the company, expose Tunde's corrupt dealings, and make sure he knew exactly what it felt like to be on the other side of power. But I also knew that this wasn't going to be easy. The board was divided, and many of them still held Tunde in high regard. They were loyal to him, so loyal, in fact, that they would fight to keep him in power. I was about to go up against a well-established system, one that had been built on lies, secrets, and manipulation. The tension in the air was palpable as I prepared for the next board meeting. The last thing I wanted was for Tunde to show up and sabotage everything. I needed to make sure that the moment I walked into that room, everyone would know who was really in charge. I spent hours preparing for the meeting. I went over the company's financial records again, reviewed all the transactions, and consulted with Ngozi. I had to be ready. There could be no room for doubt. This was my chance to put everything right. On the day of the meeting, I arrived at the company's headquarters early, much earlier than Tunde ever did. I wanted to make a statement. I walked into the boardroom with confidence, wearing a tailored black suit that made me feel powerful. The usual buzz of conversation stopped as soon as I entered. All eyes were on me. Mr. Olamide was already sitting at the head of the table, and the other board members were scattered around. I could see Tunde's empty seat beside him, but something told me that Tunde wouldn't be joining us today. He knew what was coming. "Ah, Ada," Mr. Olamide said with a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm glad you could make it. We've been waiting for you." I nodded, taking my seat at the far end of the table. I could feel the tension rise as the meeting began. The board members exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with my presence. But I wasn't going to let that intimidate me. I was here for a reason, and I wasn't leaving until I got what I wanted. "Let's get straight to the point," I said, my voice steady and firm. "I know about the deals, the underhanded transactions, the lies you've all been hiding, and I know that Tunde has been at the center of it all." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room, but I held my ground, my eyes scanning each of the board members. They were all looking at me like I was crazy, like I didn't know what I was talking about. But I had the evidence, and I was ready to expose it. "You have a choice now," I continued, my tone unwavering. "You can either stand with me and clean up the mess that Tunde has created, or you can be complicit in the downfall of this company. Because make no mistake, if we continue down this path, it's only a matter of time before everything comes crashing down." Mr. Olamide's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his expression. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "Ada," he said, his voice calm but cold, "you've made some bold claims, but you need to understand that this company is more than just a few bad decisions. It's about reputation, legacy." "Legacy?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Legacy means nothing if it's built on lies. And you know it, Mr. Olamide. You've been covering for Tunde because you thought he was your ticket to success. But now you're going to have to make a choice." I could see the other board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, some of them glancing at each other. They were starting to feel the pressure. But the real battle hadn't even begun. Just then, the door opened, and in walked Tunde. He looked disheveled, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite place. He walked to the head of the table, where Mr. Olamide sat, and there was a moment of silence before he spoke. "I'm sorry I'm late," Tunde said, his voice flat, "but I've heard enough." I felt a rush of anger and frustration flood through me. How dare he show up like this, as if he still had any say in what was happening. "Save it, Tunde," I said, cutting him off. "You don't get to apologize anymore. You don't get to make excuses for your actions. You've lied to me, to the board, to everyone, and now you're going to pay for it." His eyes flicked toward me, and for a split second, I saw something in his expression, something like fear. But it was gone just as quickly, replaced by the familiar mask of arrogance. "Enough of this," Tunde snapped, standing up. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Ada, but this is my company. I built this from the ground up, and you can't just come in here and take everything away from me." I stood up too, matching his intensity. "This isn't your company anymore, Tunde. It never was. It's mine now." The room went silent as my words hung in the air. Tunde froze, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. The other board members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to proceed. But I knew what had to happen. I had the power now. The ball was in my court. "Mr. Olamide," I said, turning my attention to him, "it's time to make the right decision. For the company. For everyone who's been affected by Tunde's actions." For a moment no one moved. The tension in the room was suffocating. But then, Mr. Olamide nodded slowly, his eyes locking with mine. "You're right," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. We'll do what's best for the company. The board has spoken, Ada. You're in charge now. And just like that, I had won. Tunde was left standing there, speechless, as the board officially handed me control of the company. I could see the disbelief in his eyes, but I didn't care. I had played my cards perfectly, and now I was the one in charge. As I walked out of the boardroom, my heart raced. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control. The days following my victory in the boardroom were a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and careful calculations. I had claimed control of the company, but now came the hardest part, actually running it. The weight of the responsibility settled on me like a heavy cloak, but I knew I had made the right choice. I was no longer just a wife scorned. I was the woman in charge, and it was time to make my mark. But despite the thrill of victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. Tunde, though defeated for now, was still out there. I knew he wouldn't go down without a fight, and I wasn't naive enough to think the rest of the board would simply fall in line. There were still people loyal to him, people who had worked with him for years. They would be looking for any weakness to exploit. I had to stay sharp. I had to play this game with precision, with patience. One wrong move, and everything I had just fought for could come crashing down. That afternoon, as I sat at my desk in the CEO's office, reviewing the company's quarterly reports, I heard a knock on the door. I didn't look up. Come in, I called out. The door creaked open, and I glanced up to see Ngozi standing there. She had a serious expression on her face, one that told me this wasn't going to be a casual visit. What's going on? I asked, setting down the papers in front of me. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. There's something you need to know, she said, her voice low. Tunde's not giving up. He's been meeting with some of the board members in private. They're planning something. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of something? I don't know yet, Ngozi replied, her brows furrowed in concern. But I've been hearing whispers. He's trying to rally support, get people on his side. He's telling them that you don't know what you're doing, that you're not fit to lead the company. I clenched my fists. I had known this would happen. Tunde wasn't going to just accept losing everything without a fight. What are you suggesting we do? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I think it's time we make our next move, she said, her eyes narrowing. We can't let him gather any more support. We need to solidify your position as quickly as possible. Make it clear that you're in charge, and anyone who tries to undermine you will face the consequences. I nodded slowly, considering her words. You're right. We need to act fast. But I don't want to make any hasty decisions. I want to make sure we're covering all our bases. Ngozi smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. That's why you're in charge now, Ada. You're thinking ahead. We spent the next few hours brainstorming strategies, discussing how to secure the loyalty of the board and the employees. We planned a series of internal meetings, restructured some of the company's operations, and even began drafting communication to the media to announce the changes. It was all about creating the illusion of stability, showing everyone that the transition of power had been smooth and that I was in control. The next day, I called a company-wide meeting. I wanted to address the staff, make sure everyone knew that the company was still in good hands, and assure them that the changes were for the better. It wasn't just about silencing the rumors, it was about building trust, earning loyalty. I stood before the employees in the large conference room, feeling their eyes on me. It was a strange sensation, being at the center of attention in this way. But I had to push through. I had to prove to them and to myself that I was capable of leading them. Good afternoon, everyone. I began, my voice steady. I know there has been a lot of uncertainty in the air lately. I want to assure you all that things are changing, but they're changing for the better. I am here to lead this company into a new era. We have a lot of work to do, but I am confident that together, we can achieve great things. There was a soft murmur of approval from the staff, but I could see the skepticism in some of their eyes. It would take time for them to fully trust me. I knew that. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. As you all know, we've been through some challenges recently. But we're going to turn this around, I continued. I need your support. I need you to stand with me as we move forward and build a stronger, more transparent company. The room was still tense, but I could feel the shift beginning. Slowly, I saw people nodding, listening. Some faces still unsure, but many more looking at me with a sense of curiosity, and maybe even hope. When the meeting was over, I returned to my office, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. I had made my first big move as CEO, and now it was time to see if it would pay off. But even as I sat at my desk, trying to gather my thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder, what was Tunde planning? What was his next move? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The following afternoon, I received an email from a contact in the legal department. The subject line read, "Urgent, Tunde's legal action." My heart skipped a beat as I opened the email. It was a formal request from Tunde's legal team. He was filing a lawsuit against me for unjustly seizing control of the company. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. This was it. The gloves were off. Tunde was making his move, and now the real battle for control was about to begin. But I wasn't going to back down. I had come too far. The days that followed Tunde's legal action were nothing short of chaotic. As soon as I received the email from his legal team, I knew things were about to escalate. This wasn't just about power anymore. It was about control, money, and the future of everything I had worked for. Tunde had made his move, and now I had to respond. I immediately called Ngozi. I needed her by my side. She had been my trusted ally throughout this whole ordeal. And now, more than ever, I needed her sharp mind. "Ada," Ngozi said when she picked up, her voice steady. "What's going on? You sound off." "It's Tunde," I said, my voice tight. "He's filed a lawsuit. He's trying to take the company back. He's claiming that I stole control, that it's an unjust acquisition." There was a pause on the other end. "I figured this was coming," she said, her tone measured. "You're going to need more than just a strong defense. This is going to be a full-blown battle, Ada." "I know," I replied, running a hand through my hair in frustration. "I can't afford to lose now. I've worked too hard for this. I won't let him take everything back." "Let's get to work," she said. "We'll need to gather every piece of evidence, every document, every record that shows how you legally came into control of the company. We'll also need to hit him with a counterclaim. If he's going to play dirty, we can't just stand there and let him do it." I nodded, feeling a fire light up inside of me. Tunde had no idea what he was getting into. He had underestimated me, thinking that I was just a wife to be discarded. But I was so much more than that now, and I wasn't about to let him take me down. For the next few days, Ngozi and I worked tirelessly. We gathered every financial record, every contract, every document that showed how I had legally acquired the shares in the company. We worked with the company's lawyers, digging into every detail. I didn't care how long it took. I was going to win this. But as we prepared for the legal battle, something unexpected happened. I started receiving calls, not from Tunde's team, but from people within the company. People who had been loyal to him, people I didn't even know had been watching. They had seen what had happened, and they were ready to back me up. One of them, a senior manager named Chika, reached out to me privately. "I know what's going on, Ada," she said, her voice serious, "and I just want you to know, I'm on your side. Tunde's been playing everyone, and I'm not going to let him do it anymore." Chika had been with the company for years, and I trusted her. "Thank you, Chika. I really appreciate your support. You're not alone in this," she said, her voice full of conviction. "There are others who are with you too. We know what Tunde has been doing, and we won't let him get away with it." The support from the employees was overwhelming. I had expected resistance, but instead, I found loyalty in the places I least expected. People were starting to see me as the leader I was meant to be. They were ready to rally behind me, and that made all the difference. As the weeks passed, the legal battle began to intensify. Tunde's legal team was relentless, and they had deep pockets. But with Ngozi and the company's legal team by my side, we were holding our ground. Every time Tunde made a move, we countered. Every time he tried to discredit me, we showed the truth. But then, just when I thought I had a handle on things, Tunde made a bold move. It was late one evening when I received a message from Mr. Olamide. It was brief, but it carried a weight that made my stomach drop. "Meet me tomorrow. It's about Tunde. I have information that could change everything." I didn't hesitate. I called Ngozi immediately. "I'm meeting with Mr. Olamide tomorrow," I said, my voice tight. "He says he has information that could change the game." "What kind of information?" Ngozi asked, sounding concerned. "I don't know yet," I said. "But if he's reaching out to me now, it's because he knows something we don't." The next day, I walked into Mr. Olamide's office with a mix of caution and curiosity. He was sitting at his desk, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite place. Anxiety, maybe? Or something more urgent. "Ada," he said, standing as I entered. "Please take a seat." I did, folding my hands in my lap. "What's going on, Mr. Olamide? You said you had something important to tell me." He nodded slowly, glancing over his shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. "It's about Tunde," he began, his voice low. "I've been sitting on this information for a while, but I think it's time, you know. Tunde didn't just try to take control of the company through deceit. He's been involved in something much bigger, something illegal, and it's worse than you think." My heart raced as he spoke, his words sinking in slowly. "What do you mean?" "There are financial discrepancies, transactions that don't add up," Mr. Olamide continued, pulling out a stack of papers from his desk drawer. "I've been covering for him, trying to protect the company. But I can't do it anymore, Ada. He's been skimming funds. He's been using the company as a front for his own dealings. And now it's come back to bite him." I felt the ground shift beneath me. This wasn't just about a company takeover. This was about criminal activity, things Tunde had been hiding from everyone, things that could destroy him and the company if they came to light. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Olamide met my gaze, his expression serious. "You have the power now, Ada. You need to decide what happens next. If this goes public, it could ruin everything. But if you handle it carefully, you could take control of everything, not just the company." I sat there, stunned, the weight of his words pressing down on me. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit together, and I realized just how deep Tunde's betrayal went. He had gambled with everything, and now he was about to lose it all. But I wasn't just going to sit back and watch. I had a decision to make. I could expose him and take everything, or I could bury it all and protect the company. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. The weight of Mr. Olamide's words lingered in my mind for days. I had always known Tunde was hiding something, but I never imagined it would be something this big. Something that could bring down not just his reputation but the company he had once claimed to have built. The stakes had risen dramatically. It wasn't just about power anymore, it was about justice. And I had the power to either expose Tunde for what he had done or protect the company from the scandal that would tear it apart. I knew that the decision I was about to make would change everything. There would be no turning back once the truth was revealed. If I went public with Tunde's illegal activities, it would ruin him. And it would also ruin the company. But if I covered it up, I would be complicit in his actions. There would be no peace for me, no way to live with myself knowing that I had allowed corruption to continue. I spent several sleepless nights weighing my options, pacing my apartment, listening to the relentless rhythm of my thoughts. But in the end, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the employees who had stood by me, for the future of the company, and for my own sense of integrity. On the day of the final board meeting, I walked into the conference room with a calm resolve. I had already made the decision. I wasn't going to play Tunde's games anymore. He had betrayed me, and he had betrayed everyone who had trusted him. Today, that was going to end. As I took my seat at the head of the table, the room fell silent. The board members, who had been divided on my leadership until now, were looking at me with uncertainty. Tunde wasn't there yet, but I could feel his presence looming over the room. He had been conspicuously absent from the last few meetings, but I knew he would show up today. He had no choice. The doors to the conference room opened with a creak, and Tunde stepped in. He looked different today, more composed, but there was an edge to him that I hadn't seen before. His eyes met mine, and for a moment it felt like a battle between us. He had no idea what was coming. He walked to the table, and without saying a word, sat down. The tension was palpable, and I could sense the unease of the other board members. They were all waiting for something to happen, waiting for me to make the first move. And I did. I know you've all been hearing rumors. I began, my voice steady, about me, about Tunde, and about the future of this company. But today we're going to clear the air once and for all. Today we deal with the truth. Tunde shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes narrowing. He knew I was about to expose him, but he wasn't going to let me do it without a fight. "What are you talking about, Ada?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "There's nothing to clear up. I'm still the one in charge here. I built this company from the ground up. You don't have the right." "Enough," I interrupted, my voice cutting through his words. "You don't get to say that anymore. You don't get to act like you have any claim over this company. Not after everything you've done." The room went silent, and I could feel the eyes of the board members on me. They were waiting, unsure of what I would say next. "I know about the illegal transactions," I continued, my words slow and deliberate. "The skimming of funds, the shady deals, everything you've been hiding. I have the evidence right here." I pulled out the stack of documents Mr. Olamide had given me and placed them on the table in front of me. Tunde's face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He had underestimated me, thought he could get away with his actions, but now it was clear he knew I was in control. "You've been using the company for your own personal gain, Tunde," I said, my voice cold. "You've lied to me, to the board, to everyone. And now it's time for you to face the consequences." Tunde's mouth moved, but no words came out. His pride had been shattered, and he knew he had no defense. The board members sat in stunned silence, their eyes flicking between us. They knew the gravity of what was happening, and now they knew they had no choice but to side with me. "I could expose everything," I said, the weight of the decision pressing on me. "But I'm not going to do that. Not yet. We're going to handle this internally. We're going to clean up the mess you've made, Tunde. And if you cooperate, you'll leave with some dignity. If not, well, then you'll face the consequences." Tunde's hands shook as he reached for the papers in front of him. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had thought he was untouchable. He had thought he could control me, control everyone. But now the power had shifted. I was in charge. "I'll give you one chance to do the right thing," I said, my voice firm. "If you step down and allow me to take control fully, we can work together to rebuild this company. But if you continue with these lies, I will expose you for what you truly are." Tunde looked at the documents in front of him, his hands trembling. He knew he had no choice. He had been caught. Slowly he nodded, his face a mask of defeat. "I'll step down," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I won't fight you anymore." A sense of relief washed over me, but I didn't let it show. I knew I had won, but this was just the beginning of rebuilding everything. The company would survive, but it would be on my terms now. As I looked around the room, I could see the board members slowly nodding in agreement. Some looked relieved, others uncertain, but all of them knew this was the right choice. "Thank you, everyone," I said, standing up. The company belongs to all of us now. Let's make sure we build something better than what we had before. As the meeting concluded, I walked out of the room, feeling a strange sense of closure. The battle had been hard, but I had come out victorious. I had reclaimed my life, my future, and my dignity. Tunde had lost everything, but I had gained everything, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me. The weeks that followed the board meeting were a whirlwind of activity. The decision to remove Tunde from the company was made, and while it was a moment of personal victory for me, it also marked the beginning of a new phase in my life, one that was filled with both challenges and opportunities. As soon as the dust settled, I took charge. The company's operations, though efficient, had been compromised by years of Tunde's manipulation and corruption. There was a lot of work to be done, rebuilding trust, restoring the integrity of the company, and most importantly, making sure the employees knew they were valued, that their futures were secure. I held several meetings with the department heads and key managers, reassuring them of the company's direction. They had been watching everything unfold from the sidelines, some more loyal to Tunde than to the company itself. It wasn't going to be easy to change their perception of me, but I wasn't going to back down. In every meeting, I made sure to be transparent. I shared my vision for the company, outlined my plans for its future, and encouraged the staff to come to me with their concerns. It was about creating a culture of openness and collaboration, something Tunde had never done. I also took the time to personally reach out to some of the employees who had supported me in the background. Chica, the senior manager who had been one of the first to reach out, was invaluable. She had been with the company for over 15 years and had seen the rise and fall of several leaders. I trusted her completely, and she became one of my most trusted allies. "Ada," Chica said one afternoon as we sat in my office, going over some proposals, "I just want you to know that we're all behind you. We're glad you're here. We need someone like you to lead us." I smiled at her, grateful for her support. "I appreciate that, Chica. I know this hasn't been easy, but we're in this together. We're going to build something we can all be proud of." The trust was slowly coming back. Employees who had been wary of me before, unsure of my ability to lead, were beginning to warm up to the idea of change. But there were still whispers about Tunde's fall from grace and what that meant for the company. People were watching to see if I could actually deliver on my promises. The board, too, had to be handled delicately. Many of them were still loyal to Tunde, despite the evidence of his wrongdoing. I had to make sure they understood that I wasn't out for revenge. I wanted to lead, but I wanted to do it with integrity. It was a delicate balance, but one I was willing to navigate. Then, one evening, just as I was preparing to leave the office for the day, I received an unexpected visit. It was Mr. Olamide. I wasn't sure if it was a visit to offer congratulations or if there was more to his involvement than I knew. I opened the door to his office, letting him in. "Ada," he said, his voice calm but serious. "We need to talk." I closed the door behind him and motioned for him to sit. "What's on your mind?" "I've been meaning to speak with you about something important," he began. "Something you might want to consider as you take control of the company." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued but cautious. "Go on." He leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You've done well to take control, Ada. But this is just the beginning. The company is still fragile. And there are a lot of forces at play here. Forces you might not be aware of." I was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. "What do you mean?" "The truth about Tunde's activities is only part of the story," he said, his tone low. "There are people, investors, who have a lot at stake here. If you want to truly secure your position, you'll need to make sure you have their support. If you don't, they will find a way to undermine you." I sat back, the gravity of his words sinking in. "Are you saying there are people who still back Tunde?" "I'm saying there are people who will do whatever it takes to keep the status quo. And right now, they're watching you. They want to see if you can handle the pressure." I was quiet for a moment, letting his words sink in. I had known it wouldn't be easy to fully take control, But hearing it from Mr. Olamide, someone who had been in the business for years, made it clear just how high the stakes were. "What do you suggest I do?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with determination. "You need to be proactive," he said. "You need to make alliances, secure your position, show the board and the investors that you're in control, that you have a clear vision for the future. Don't just sit back and wait for things to happen. Take charge, Ada. And do it now, before anyone else has the chance to make a move." I nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his words. This wasn't just about cleaning up Tunde's mess anymore. It was about solidifying my place at the helm of the company. It was time to act. "Thank you, Mr. Olamide," I said. "I'll take care of it." As he left my office, I sat back in my chair, feeling the pressure of what was to come. But I wasn't afraid. I had been through too much to turn back now. I was in charge, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The next few days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and late-night strategy sessions. I made sure to meet with key investors, reassured the board of my vision, and outlined plans for the company's growth. I wasn't just fighting for my position anymore. I was fighting for the future of the company, for the employees who depended on me, and for my own sense of justice. And as the days passed, I felt more and more confident that I was on the right path. But I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still challenges, still people who wanted to see me fail. But I was ready. I had the power now, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away. The final battle was over, but the real work had only just begun. It had been months since that pivotal board meeting, and in many ways it felt like a lifetime. The company had gone through a complete overhaul: leadership, operations, culture, and the ripple effect of Tunde's downfall was still being felt throughout the organization. But with each passing day, I saw more and more evidence that the changes I had fought for were taking root. People were beginning to believe in me, in the company's future, and, most importantly, in the values I was instilling. The weight of leadership was heavy at times, but it had become my strength. Every decision I made wasn't just for the company. It was for the people who believed in the vision I had set for them. And while Tunde's legal battles dragged on, threatening to haunt us for months, I had already made sure to secure the company's future. His name, once synonymous with power and control, had faded into the background. But the truth was, my victory wasn't just about taking over a company or exposing my husband's betrayal. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and my place in this world. I wasn't just Ada, the wife of a corporate executive. I was Ada, the woman who took control of her destiny, who rose from the ashes of betrayal and built something strong and lasting. One sunny afternoon, as I sat in my office looking out over the city skyline, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The road hadn't been easy. It had been filled with heartbreak, uncertainty, and moments where I questioned everything I thought I knew about loyalty and love. But each of those moments had led me here, stronger, wiser, and more certain of my path. The phone on my desk rang, breaking my train of thought. I picked it up, expecting it to be a routine call from one of my team members. But it wasn't. "Ada, it's Chica," said the familiar voice at the other end. "We need to talk. There's something I think you should know." I sat up straighter, feeling the familiar knot of tension in my stomach. "What is it?" "I don't know how to say this, but I think it's time you heard the full truth," she said, her voice tight. "About Tunde, about his dealings with some of the board members before all of this happened. You've been focused on moving forward, and you're doing an amazing job. But this could change everything." A sharp pang of anxiety surged through me. It wasn't just the business anymore. If there was more to uncover, it could mean another round of legal battles, another round of scandal. I had worked so hard to build something honest, something real. Could I handle another betrayal? "Chica, tell me what's going on," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a hesitation that only heightened my concern. "Tunde wasn't working alone, Ada. There were others involved, others who helped him cover up his tracks, people who are still inside the company making decisions. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt the ground beneath me shift. The victory I had claimed seemed fragile now. Who's still working with him? I'll send you everything I have, she said, her voice low. But be careful. These people are still powerful. They've been working in the shadows, and some of them may try to come after you again. As Chica hung up, I sat there for a few moments, stunned by the gravity of what she had just said. Even after all this time, Tunde's influence still lingered in the shadows, waiting to resurface. But I couldn't let it stop me. I had already survived one battle. I could survive another. That night, I didn't sleep much. I spent hours going through the files that Chica had sent me. Documents, emails, and financial records filled my inbox. As I combed through them, I realized just how deep the corruption had run. The board members who had been loyal to Tunde were still trying to control the company from behind the scenes. The schemes they had set in motion were far-reaching. But they wouldn't succeed, not while I was in charge. The next morning, I called a private meeting with Ngozi and the legal team. We went over the documents and discussed our next steps. The decision was clear. I had to clean house. It wasn't just about protecting the company anymore. It was about eradicating the last remnants of Tunde's influence. For the next several weeks, we worked tirelessly to cut ties with the people who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. The process was messy, filled with tough conversations and difficult decisions. But each day, I felt more empowered, more in control. I was no longer the woman standing by, waiting for someone else to make decisions for me. I was the one calling the shots. And as the dust settled, I began to see the fruits of my labor. The company was thriving again, the staff were motivated, and the investors who had once been skeptical were now backing me completely. They had seen the strength in me, the leadership I had shown in the face of adversity. And now they were ready to move forward with me at the helm. Tunde's final legal battles fizzled out, and with his name tarnished, he was left with nothing. He had gambled everything on his pride, on the belief that he could control me, and in the end, he had lost it all. I had taken control of my life, my future, and the company he had once thought was his. I stood at the top of the corporate world, but the triumph I felt was not about the position, not about the power. It was about proving to myself that I was stronger than the pain, stronger than the betrayal. I had built something new, and this time it was mine. As I looked out over the city from my office window, I smiled. The future was bright, and no one could take that away from me. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this.